to the premiere episode of the Route 77 podcast. In today's show, we will introduce ourselves, explain the reasons behind founding Route 77 Ministries, and provide an overview of what our ministry is all about. Okay, welcome to Route 77, episode 1, the introduction episode. This episode will talk about each of our testimonies and our single life journey, as well as why we started Route 77, what Route 77 is all about, and a brief overview of the pillars of Route 77. So I'm Natasha Brody. I have been starting this ministry, and I will be talking first. I'll have them introduce themselves. Before that, we also have...
I'm Monique. I'm the administrative person, music coordinator, single since 2007 when my husband passed away. And there's a big story in there that may come up later on in our sessions. But for now, this is me.
And we have one more person.
I'm David. I will be managing most of the technology side of things, websites to other things. And I've been single for pretty much most of my life, other than the occasional thing in high school. And yeah.
You had a thing in high school?
It was only 6 months.
Okay, so I'll start off. Okay, as I said, my name's Natasha. I come from a very conservative, Reformed background. I grew up in a Reformed church. My father was a lay pastor for many years and an elder in that church. It was very small, maybe 30 people with all the kids included. And I became a Christian when I was about 6 or 7. I remember laying in bed one night and just starting to think, I didn't want to go to hell and I wanted to be saved. So I prayed to Jesus and I prayed to God and for salvation. And then I ran downstairs to tell my mom, and she told me to go back to bed and stop wasting time. So she feels really bad about that now. It's okay. It's funny because I was a boundary pushing kid. So instead of I need another drink or I need to go to the bathroom or I got saved, but it was just another reason for me not to go to sleep. So I do really remember it. And so that was when I became a Christian, and I spent many years in the church. I became a member right after that, and I've held various positions of like teaching in Sunday school, mostly just various ages. And then when I was just coming up to 30, I got married. It was a very unhealthy marriage for a decade. And then I got out of that marriage when I was 40, and I am currently divorced and living a new single life. So growing up in the Reformed church, I was always taught that the highest calling of a woman was a wife and mother. And while I'm not saying those things are not important, it just was never taught anything else. So there's no, what do we do if that doesn't happen? What if you don't become a wife? What if you don't become a mother? There's no sort of guidance in regards to that. When I went to university, it was simply to find somebody to get married. It never happened. I spent all my 20s trying to get married. That's what I was trying to aim for, and basically did nothing with my life. I stayed on my parents' dairy farm and helped my dad, which was important, which he needed, but I just didn't do anything. I basically lived a holding pattern of waiting to be married. Like my life wouldn't begin until I was married. And that's one reason that when my ex-husband did come along, I was ripe for falling for everything because I just wanted to get married. And then through that whole marriage was the most important thing. I was a wife. We didn't have kids. We weren't able to, but I was a wife, so I was going to hold on to that. And then when everything fell apart, everything became crashing down around me. I didn't know what was right, what was wrong, where I was headed. I had no foundation. I had no anchor. I had nothing because even though I was a believer and I believed in God and I wanted to follow him, my whole life was revolving around marriage. So when I became single again in my 40s, I had to really look at singleness, see what it was and what it was meant to be, what God meant it to be. And that's when the ideas for this ministry came up in my head. And really around that time, I met Monique. We both do Taekwondo together. And we ended up becoming good friends. We have some similarities in our backstories, so we connected. And then we bought a house together just as friends. And we've talked about it off and on over the last couple of years, this need for a new view on singleness. And we really started to both live our single lives in a positive way, like actually grasping onto it and actually living our lives instead of just waiting to find another person to marry or be all sad because I wasn't married anymore or that I wasn't a mother or any of these things. So yeah, just really looking at it. And a couple of years ago, I decided to go for my master's in apologetics through Trinity Western. And when I did one of the courses there, I wrote a paper on singleness, talking in 1 Corinthians. And it really kind of grounded all the things that I had been thinking about and talking with Monique about.
Resonated.
Yeah, it really resonated. It helped to really biblically ground it. And then realizing that not very many churches ever teach about singleness outside of the fact that it's a calling for some. That's basically it. You can be called to singleness, but that's just for some people. Yeah, so that's a brief overview of my life. We'll discuss more about the formation of the ministry a little bit later.
And this is Monique. Similarities, except that I was not raised in the church. But I had the same feeling like when I was in high school, I wanted to be a veterinarian. But at that time, I'm going to date myself because it was a really long time ago. Veterinary medicine was only being taught in one province in Canada at that time, and that was Prince Edward Island. And I lived in Calgary. I was still only a teenager, and the idea or thought of going all the way across Canada, which felt like the other side of the world, to learn how to become a veterinarian was just not. So I have to find something closer. But really, my dream was to be married, have kids, have a house and the white picket fence, and because that's what everybody seemed to be doing. And when I left high school and I wasn't even dating anybody, it almost set in a panic mode. So I started just grabbing onto anybody who I had a little bit of interest in, who showed a bit of interest in me, and hey, let's date. That was a pretty colorful time for my life. And I have a daughter that I had out of wedlock before I became a Christian. Her father and I were in Calgary, and then he wanted to move to BC. And because I had family in BC, I said, yes, I want to go. It's because I loved living in BC. I wanted to be there, loved the ocean. So we moved here, and then I got pregnant and thought, now that I am, maybe now he will marry me. He wouldn't even support me. He was that kind of person. And I became a Christian. The same kind of thing is that fear. For me, it was the fear of being left behind, because the Left Behind series was going really strong at that time. And I thought, I didn't want to be left behind. So by myself with the TV set, I got on my knees and I asked Jesus to be my Lord and Savior. My life has not been the same since. Had a whole lot of things and going off track. Needless to say, after that happened, a friend of mine convinced me that it wasn't proper for me to stay with my daughter's father, even though he was her father, because he would marry me, so I should leave him. So I did, because that's the kind of person I was. Somebody told me to do is what I did. A lot of missed opportunities and a lot of regrets. And then I met my husband, and he was a churchgoer. A whirlwind relationship. We got married pretty much in the same couple of months that we started dating. We weren't even really dating, but we got married, and that ended pretty quickly. We were back and forth actually, because I was told that as a single mother, nobody would ever want to marry me. And since he was willing to be with me, sometimes not. So that's how our relationship went until he passed away in 2007. So there's a whole lot of big story in there, and I'm not going to get into that because we will probably cover that in another podcast. So yeah, so after that, the idea of dating anybody, like I went through an identity crisis after he died.
Yeah.
Because I was like, who am I? For the last 14 years since him and I had gotten married, who am I? I was always a wife. Now I'm not a wife anymore. So now what do I do? And who do I turn to when I can't turn to anybody? And I went through a lot of depression, I think, in that time. Spent a lot of time by myself. I would work, go home, go to church, work, go home. And I remember being very lonely during that time and had nobody to turn to because all of my friends were married people and they didn't understand what I was going through. You just sit at home. Why don't you come visit us? Because you're married and you have things to do and I'm working and stuff. And I remember when I started to find other interests and started finding myself coming back because of these other interests. And one of them was getting very excited about learning about the Korean culture. And there's my thing. And if you don't, you will find out I'm a huge fan of K-pop and Korean drama. And I also like Chinese drama. I watch subtitles. I read subtitles. And yes, you can watch and still get the nuances having this conversation somewhere else. And then after finding that, a year later, I found myself thinking, wow, I really wanted to do martial arts ever since I was like in my 20s. But I thought I was too old for it. And I remember when I found our Taekwondo school, I went, can I do this? Of course you can do this. And now a black belt. Yes, going for my second. And yes, I am very close to retirement, in case you were wondering. Still a little ways, but closer than not. And it's been the best thing that ever happened to me. My confidence level has changed. I've met friends. I've gotten support. I don't feel alone anymore. And I think that's the key. And I think that's what happened with us when we got the house, is that all of a sudden we were not all alone by ourselves with nobody to talk to. And that was the thing that I found I struggled the most with, is that I just wish I had somebody to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. Just say, hey, how's your day?
Yep.
And things like that.
Yeah. Or I can't believe this. And I just need to and, yeah. And I think the funniest thing about this whole thing is how alike our thought process can be. Yeah. And it's almost bizarre just because we come from such different backgrounds, even like your nationality and my nationality and where we grew up and the schools we went to and our life experiences. Yet still, we come to this point, we think alike. That's pretty weird.
I think this, which is, and then I think that, I agree. So we can get some interesting conversations going.
Yeah. I plan on being the driving force with the questions. How about this? What about, you can mention this. Yeah. I'm going to try to be that, because I know sometimes it's hard to just talk about one topic.
Yeah, and we want to and sometimes we can get distracted onto tangents as well.
Oh yeah, those wonderful little rabbit trails. David, it's your turn. I'm done. I don't want to say no more.
All right. Okay. So again, I'm David. My life has been a bit rocky, as my friends know. I have a visual impairment. So growing up, we moved around a lot. And so we were never stationed, or we were never committed to a single church. We were always moving around. So I've been through many churches. And I think that was primarily what dulled, I guess, my faith, and the fact that I was raised in a Christian household. So a lot of the scriptures and a lot of things that were supposed to be impactful in my life ended up being numbed. And I get that from private schools too, because for my elementary school, I was raised and I went to elementary school, but it was a public school. So very different context, very different learning environment than if you went to a Christian private school. And about grade 4 or 5 years old, the little hiccups from the school didn't properly helped me learn because of my visual impairment. My parents moved me and my brother to private schools. These private schools were much more impactful in the ways of my faith because, again, the environments were much more constrained. But I always felt a little numbed through elementary, middle, and high school. And it wasn't around until grade 10 or 11 that I began to realize that, wait, haven't defined myself in a matter. I tried many sports, I tried golfing and stuff, but nothing fit well enough with my visual impairment until Taekwondo, of course, that I take with Natasha and Monique. That was impactful in so many ways. And I'll get in that too a bit later. But as I grew up, it's just hard knowing that all these opportunities came by to know the Lord. And I felt like they weren't impactful or that I couldn't approach them. And a portion of that was because of the cultural standards of singleness, where people expected others to find a partner. And I think where this comes in is that it was so pushed as I was growing up from the people around me and a bit from my parents that life had to be, you go to school, you find a partner, you get married and you have kids and you work until you die. And only then you should go to church and then your relationship would grow stronger. And for the longest time, that's what I believed. And that's how it was pushed on me until high school, grade 10, 11. I realized that my faith was very weak and I wanted to change that. So I started to focus. I changed my path from going directly to university in computer science to spending a year or two at Bible college. And that also dramatically impacted my faith. Once I was done for 1 or 2 years and I studied apologetics, like Natasha's doing her master's, although I'm not quite there, I do intend to go back and I do intend to study apologetics again. But for now, I'll finish up my computer science and then I guess get some stably financial. But
Financially stable.
Financially stable. I've been to Ontario. Another impactful insight was that I actually went to Ontario for a visual impairment program that would help me try to navigate the world as someone who can't see very well. And a massive thing there is I learned is that there are others too who have the same impairment, but may not have the luxury of being raised in a Christian household or introduced to Jesus as the way I was. And I found that there was a lot of suffering and a lot of, just suffering in this regard. People didn't have great lives. And I guess I found a gift that I had for listening and understanding people's situations more than they realized. And I think God gave me this ability so that I could help others. And again, the culture was putting all this, you have to be married. And then once you're married, you get to know God and stuff. So it drove me to push towards understanding how Jesus lived his life as a single man and his service to the world. So an idea or my goal was to try to become as knowledgeable as I can about the works of God and Jesus and try to share that with people who feel like they're trapped by society's norms about marriage and stuff so that they may understand that you don't necessarily have to conform or get married to know God, that you can know God before and after or during, just as much as people expect you to, that it's not a requirement or a stepping stone. That trip shook my faith a bit, but it made me realize that God is willing to sit by and protect and watch and guide. Just brings back hard memories, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, after the, sorry.
It's okay.
Fair enough. Just because I made some good friends who were in the tough places and I still help them here and there.
Oh.
Anyway, after that, I was still in high school. I think grade 11 or 12 at this point. And I did take an extra year of high school just to catch up.
Didn't you date in high school?
Yes, yeah, I dated a girl named Alexis for 6 months, and ironically, she was the daughter of the head of IT at the school, and that was our running joke in our family while that if you ever date, you're going to date the daughter of the head of IT in the high school. And it turns out I did for 6 months. So that was also insightful. She went to a Catholic church. I wasn't raised Catholic, and then my mom was raised Catholic, so she explained a couple things to me, and after a while, we broke up and we moved on our separate ways. And around that time, that's when I decided I wanted to dedicate my entire life to God. And I got baptized around that time, right when I graduated high school. After that, it was after a couple years in university, in Bible college, and I came out of Bible college and I spent, I think, a year or two in just a regular university studying computer science. I was still living at home, and my mom actually found Master Choi, which is our teacher for Taekwondo. And he also had a visual impairment, and that inspired me because I always wanted to do Taekwondo. Monique was saying, almost everyone wants to do Taekwondo now. So that really gave me inspiration to actually start Taekwondo. And growing up and all this stuff, and I wouldn't call it a miracle, or well, technically it's a miracle, but every person I meet, every friend I make always ends up having the same faith. And it's a miracle because any of my closest friends always ended up having the same faith. We believed in the same things, and it always supported me. So it's like something was always nudging me back into the faith of God. And it also brings back lots of memories of how God is always protecting and always watching over you. Taekwondo was inspirational as it showed me a way of focus, a way of getting to know myself better and getting out more because I'm an introvert.
I think all three of us are introverts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here we are doing a podcast, right?
Yes. This is not going to be exhausting.
Not at all.
And it's not a God thing.
Yes. So. Exactly.
Yeah.
So Taekwondo was really impactful, especially when Master Choi said he was going to Korea. That was huge for me because I never actually been outside of the country other than maybe going to the US a couple times. And I wasn't going to go at first, but my parents really pushed for me to go. So I went, and that's when probably some of the closest friends I've ever made came into my life, Natasha, Monique. And
we consider David our
Yes.
little brother. David's our little brother.
Yeah. Yeah. We're his big sisters, and we will
Protect him.
yes,
absolutely.
Yes, I am so thankful for that and how God had made all of that happen. And then that leaves us, and that gets us to the point where we did Taekwondo for years. We struggled through training for our black belts together, and just the support from them and God and helping me up to this point in life. And obviously coming up to the point where we all got together and started working on Route 77 and these podcasts and stuff. So that's the journey of me and part of my singleness journey. And yes.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to get all this out there. I should mention we have one other person that we have involved in our ministry. He's taking a behind the scenes part at the moment. He's a children's author and an artist and very talented. I hope to get him on the podcast eventually one day. His name is
your cousin.
Yeah, and my cousin, Andy Smart. He lives in Ontario, but he's, like his name, very smart and very talented. And
He's going to be our art director.
yes, he's anything art related as well, but he also has very good mind, so he can talk things really well. So like I said, hopefully we can get him from behind the scenes to the front at some point, but that's just a good to mention him because there's four of us that have come together to start Route 77. And I guess we should talk about why we started it. Kind of touched on it. It really came from a desire to fill a void in the church and even society in general. There's just no real teaching on how to be single. Most singles ministries revolve around getting people to meet up and get married. One book I read said that the goal of most singles ministries is to put themselves out of business. So get everybody married off.
And we're in the business of keeping ourselves in business by keeping you
Single. Yeah.
No kidding.
So we have no problem with people meeting and getting married,
No,
but we want to develop a whole new life that people have never considered when it comes to singleness. And that's why we called it Route 77, because we want to think about life as a journey. It's a journey on a road to a goal, a destination. And that destination is not marriage. For a Christian, the destination of your life is heaven. If we look at Pilgrim's Progress is probably the best visual or best allegory that we can, to give an example of it, where the pilgrim who became Christian was headed toward the celestial city. That was his entire journey. And he met people along the way and who traveled with him and left and came and left. So we want to see things like that. Like, we are traveling to heaven. And when you're born single and so you're in the single lane of the highway or of the road. And at some point you may move over to a married lane or a person, or you're in a relationship. But then you may end up back on the single lane, whether through divorce or death or things like that. So you don't expect to be put back onto the single lane, and yet you do. And then so many people even then just go into a depression because they've lost the marriage side of things. And because that's what you're supposed to do. Like we've all mentioned, you get married, you have kids, you live your life. That's what you're supposed to do. But it's not the whole of one's life.
it's not the end all be all.
No, it's part of life. Singleness, marriage, it's all a part of life, and it all needs to be lived actively on a journey towards heaven. And we're hoping that by really
Focusing in on this.
focusing right in on singleness and try to develop a new way to live singleness that's based on scripture, that even if you choose or you find someone to go into the married lane and you become married, that it changes even how you view marriage.
Yeah. And then it might be healthier too.
Yeah, it might be come to a healthier point. Instead of expecting the spouse to meet all your needs and expectations, they were never meant to do that. And so we don't want that to be your goal, because if you expect a spouse to fulfill you, then you will be disappointed, and it's unfair on each other to have those expectations. But instead, if you think of your spouse as someone you are traveling this journey towards heaven with, it's someone you're helping along the way, and they're helping you along the way, and you're going forward, then we're hoping that this will create healthier relationships for people.
And I think it's also a really good idea to help focus the singles, that just because you're single doesn't mean that you are less of a person or that your life isn't fulfilling enough, because half the time your life can be way more than what it is. You don't want to live your life in regret. Years down the road, you never find that person you want to marry, and you didn't accomplish the things you wanted to accomplish because you put your life on hold, waiting for that. When I get married, then I will do all of this. Because let me tell you, when you get married, you don't have any time to do anything you want to do, because your whole life is focused around your spouse. And if you have kids, it's all focused around your kids. Then what are you going to do? Then you wait until you're in your 60s and you start your life over? That's a horrible time to wait. Do it now while you're single and you have the time.
And we're never meant to be waiting around.
No.
We're meant to be actively living our lives.
Yeah.
And when you start to say, I'm going to wait, then you're putting things on hold that God has called you to do in your single time. Your single life has purpose, just as a married life will have purpose. And your single life has a purpose that you are unable to attain in a married life.
Yep.
So you need to use the time that you have, whether it's like short. My brother got married when he was 21 and they have several kids. Or if you're like me and I was 30, I basically feel like I wasted my 20s. I did not do things in my 20s that I should have done actually actively living.
Yeah. Now, I look back at what I wanted to do when I was in high school, and I didn't do any of those kind of things because my whole focus was on wanting to be in a relationship. Why did I have those silly thoughts? And is that an esteem thing? Is that an identity thing? Is that I am nobody unless I have somebody who loves me? Does that sound?
And yet, ironically, God loves us more than any spouse could.
But at that time I wasn't a Christian,
Okay.
so I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know that. Even though I had many Christian friends and they had taken me to Sunday school, they'd taken me to church, I still did not grasp that concept. And even after I became a Christian, it took many years for me to grasp that concept that I am so loved.
I'm worth something.
Yeah.
Single.
Yeah.
So as Monique and I discussed this over the last couple of years, moving in the same house, created the conversations, and then doing that paper, it really pushed me forward to the thought of starting a ministry at some point. And then I just took a church leadership class, and God said, now's the time to start. So we started meeting. We really felt like I was so used to doing things myself. And then I realized it doesn't have to be just me. It can be Monique and I. And then I realized we need more than just females. We need to have a male side. So that's why we have David and my cousin Andy, so that we're not just coming from one side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our mission statement for our ministry is essentially, like, we call ourselves Route 77 Ministries, Redeeming Singleness. Our mission is to provide a biblical view of singleness and help people develop a healthy and active single life. That's the purpose of this ministry. And we called it Route 77 because we wanted to invoke the idea of a journey. But also in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 7, Paul says, I wish that all were as I myself am, that is single, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. So in here, Paul's not saying everybody should be single, and yet he's wishing something, saying, I wish that you were as I myself am. He's wishing a good thing. He's not wishing a bad thing on people. So if he's wishing a good thing, a single thing, then we need to see singleness as a good thing.
I feel like Paul there too is trying to get everyone to see that singleness he's trying to push people towards Jesus as well. So he's trying to get people, Paul's not saying, oh, you need to be married. Look what Jesus has done for us. He's introduced himself. He's shown and served us. And that Paul then says, you don't have to be married to begin the service to God, that you can be service to Jesus and God as you're single and as you're through marriage and stuff and all that too. And I think that's key in that component there.
Yeah. It's saying that one is as good as the other. Neither is a negative. They have their own place. They each have their own place. So even when it says each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another, is that there's different lanes on this road, but they're all to be used, that God can use all of them for good.
Yeah.
And they can be seen as positive things.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And I think hitting upon the various fears that a single person has is going to help a lot as well. And we are going to be going into those kind of things, like the fear of being alone. And I think that's the biggest one that a single person fears or has that anxiety about. It's the holidays. I have nobody to spend it with. I want to meet people, but you never leave your house.
Yeah, especially when you're an introvert, it's easier to sit at home.
It is. It's much easier just to turn on the TV or pick up your video game
especially if you've been around people all day.
Yes. And I get that because I work in retail and I have people around me and the phones are ringing. And when I get home, it's just like, don't talk to me.
We just leave each other alone. We just happy to be in the same room scrolling Facebook.
Yep.
And our Facebooks basically contain many dad jokes and and memes that are hilarious. So we just keep sharing them with one another. That's pretty much us scrolling on Facebook.
Yeah, did you see this one? Oh, I saw that one earlier. Oh, okay. And that is something that can be an encouragement to others too, is to see that you can live together with people of the same sex, and it doesn't have to be anything other than friends.
Friendship, yeah.
Friends or sisters, friends.
Yeah.
Friends.
Fist bump.
Fist bump and friends, yes. And even though David has family that's nearby that he can visit, often we'll invite him to
Yep.
do stuff with us or have a
That
family
day
dinner with
we,
us.
like that day we kidnapped him, and
Yeah,
Yep,
he
yep.
came for church and we kept him on the entire day. His cat was not impressed.
lunch, and then a movie, and
No.
then he was exhausted by the time. But it was a,
The Taekwondo tournament, I went with Natasha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 12-hour day.
oh my gosh. Yeah.
So that was brutal.
Yes, it
that
was
was
brutal. Yeah.
But yeah, it's there's many areas that we're going to cover, and we want to deal with a lot of things. We can't obviously do it all in one podcast, or you'll be here for the next 7 days. But I guess we'll just review. We have certain pillars that we've decided to base our ministry on, and we're going to do a podcast. We're planning to do a podcast on one podcast per pillar. So there's 5 of them. So we can really discuss what we mean by them, and just really get into why we think they're important and how we view them in regards to singleness. So we went with all A's. So we have 5 A's. First, we have accepted. Singles are part of the body of Christ. They are not removable or replaceable. For a church to be healthy, all parts must be healthy, including those who are single. So many single people do not feel acceptable the way they are in church or even in society.
Yep.
That there's something wrong with them.
Yep.
The second one is anchored. Everyone is anchored on something. If that thing is not God, then it has become an idol in your life. If that thing is not God, then it is subject to failure. So we need to really understand what we need to be anchored on. And a lot of times there's a temptation to anchor ourselves on our spouse or the fact that we're married.
Yep. And look what happened with ours. Woo.
Yes, things happen.
Yep.
Number 3, active. Singleness is meant to be lived actively. It is a unique part of life which has the purpose and opportunity not available at any other time. So singleness is a stage of life, and it's meant to be used. It's things that can be done during singleness that you cannot do at any other time of life.
Yep.
Number 4, accountable. Like other times of life, singleness has its struggles. Being autonomous can be difficult, and there's a temptation to handle everything yourself. That's a great problem with singles, is that, especially if you're introverts, you have a tendency to try to deal with everything yourself. And yet the Bible is constantly telling us to bear one another's burdens, confess to one another, go to others for prayer, go to others for help. Encouraging people to create like a community.
Yeah, we can talk about that struggle when we first started living together.
Yeah.
So, it was because you're so used to dealing with your own stuff, but now you've got another person who can help you, and like things, a couple of anxiety attacks, and then when it talked with you, it's like, oh, it's not that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're able to.
You guys are fortunate enough to be like best friends.
Yeah.
So I've dealt with roommates, and there's a lot of tension between roommates that don't know each other for a long period of time. But I'm getting another roommate, Chris, and I know him for a long time, so I'm excited to experience that.
As long as your cats get along, right?
Yeah. And since he's a single guy,
No, he's not, unfortunately.
Oh darn.
So there's,
we could have recruited.
but
Oh,
exactly.
he's not married.
Yeah, no,
Because he's not moving in with a wife, so he's not married. Is he just dating? Are they engaged?
no,
So
they're
it's
just dating. Julia lives in North Vancouver. So
Oh.
it's a big distance away.
He can still come in and join us for those kind of conversations about long distance dating. Does it really work?
So our final A is abiding. The Christian life is meant to persevere, push on till the end, and finish the race. Abiding living in Christ will help develop Christian character, produce contentment, and give purpose to your life regardless of relationship status. So now it's once you decided that, the single life is meant for you for whatever amount of time it is, then abiding in Christ, developing your character, becoming more like Christ it should be what you're striving for.
So, and even if you do find your partner to do life with, being a stronger person of character will just make your relationship a better one.
And again, you're not looking for that in the other person.
No,
you're looking for it in Christ, which is the proper place.
We do want to also talk about some of the questions that come up with singles. What do you think, like you mentioned, what is the highest calling, being the pros and cons, and a 5-year goal plan? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I see myself as going for my third degree. Next year is the second. So then 2 more years.
3 more years.
3?
It goes up a year. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Hey, start Taekwondo early.
Don't wait until you're in your 50s to start it, because you'll be gray and
you're trying to go for that 7th degree, and you're like, I can do it. Just let me use my walker.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I need to get my walker first. Hang on.
10 years old.
I have to develop like a walker as a weapon.
Well, David has his stick.
You got 4 canes and not 1. A stick. Oh, nice.
Or walking or cane.
It's a glorified stick.
That's what it is. It's white. So
but it'll hurt because he knows how to use bow staff.
Yep.
That's right. It will hurt. So don't mess with David.
Don't drop it in snow.
No. You have to keep listening to learn more about us.
Absolutely. So there's things like dealing with abuse.
Yes.
Dealing with esteem issues.
Being a single parent.
Yeah. And other such things along with that. What to do with your life when your life gets thrown a curveball.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Again, that comes down to the anchor. Where have you anchored it? Because that's a big thing about why things throw you for a loop.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things, like, as you're listening to our podcast, we're encouraging people to send in questions as well. And we will have a website. Our website is route77.ca.
We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Look for Route 77 or Route 77 Ministries.
Yeah.
We're hoping to start a YouTube channel eventually. We do have it signed up, but we don't have anything on there yet. We're going to hopefully get some YouTube videos up too. Our email address, route77ministries@gmail.com. So if there's any questions, any comments, you just want to say hi, you're welcome to track us down on whatever way you feel is best.
We will all take our turns in the social media, but I will probably be the one that will be trying to stay on top of it the most. Yeah, the administrator. Yeah.
Yes.
So, a computer geek from way back when computers were just starting. I took to it like a fish to water. Now you can't get me out of it. What do you mean put down the computer? My phone. Stay off my phone.
So if you've made it this far, you made it to the end of our podcast. We love that you came and joined us for today, and we hope that you enjoy the next one as we look to discuss accepted.
Yep. Thank you for joining us for our very first podcast. We look forward to you continuing along with us, and hope that you will grow as we grow.
And see your single life as something to be celebrated.
Yes, absolutely.
Any last words, David?
Just hope you guys engage in asking questions. That's very important, that you ask the questions that need to be asked, kind of thing.
Yeah. And we will do our best to answer them as best as we can.
Yes, as fast and as best we can.
Yeah. Of course, yes.
Thank you for tuning in to the Route 77 podcast. Be sure to join us next time as we delve into our first pillar, which focuses on the importance of feeling accepted. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date on all of our latest episodes, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for even more content. Until next time,
Remember to live your single life to the fullest.